Guerrero.
Hola.
Hola. Thank you very much for the presentation. We are very glad to be here. Many years ago, I come to Phoenix, but I was really trying to came to Tucson. Now we have interested because the landscape, because the contemporary is not here. Now we have the chance. We are very happy to be here and to show make reflection about our work. Yes, we will put some, how do you say, capítulos?
Yeah, some chapters.
Chapters. I say one, the other. Then we will dance. Well, first it's important for us to talk about public work because we came from the same university, UNAM, University of Mexico.
Different generations.
Different generations. almost the same. But
Yes.
we have the same feeling about how important is the architecture for the cities, for the people, and that's what we have in UNAM. And I think in our place, in our studio, to talk and to think this is very important because how can you really change with not too much money, with materials, local materials, with people, even with a very local problems to make the buildings because they don't want to make architectural buildings. I mean, they only do buildings. So to be there to make this architecture is like a fighting, but it's important because then they can have this place. For example, this is a place, working shop, that works carpenters, painters, many people that works for, how do you say, a municipio, like a place, a government place. And then how can we work with the same economical money that they do a really very industrial building? So we decided to use volcanic stones, and then we begin to really, how can we make with the structure very more light, the structure, and to know how works the materials. Even we really like this kind of image because you can see here how works everything and how really can we get the light at the same time how can we have a building, strong building that all the chaotic things, accidents happens there can be together. Or this market, we have even a price here with this market, but it's nice because this price of the Bienal of Mexican Architecture is more for big projects, and we went with this very little market, and it's important for our generation, my generation and your generation, because then the people say we can do public buildings. So in this case, we talk with the people a lot. How can they really need a market? We decide to make some market that the difference of the height of the roof can remember the tianguis, the old markets we see in all the world, like the popular markets, and how can you really cross the wind, making the south and in the north to not have the sun direct, and then you can have a very nice light inside, and then the people can really begin to change. One more time, the accident is important, how they can leave the place. Or in this case, we make a school of blind people. That was very important because they say, okay, we need that's maybe the first big project we have in the office in 201. And when they say make a school of blind, we say, okay, so the problem is not how to see, the problem is to understand the other sense. I mean, how you touch, how you smell, the textures, everything. So that's why we decide to do something that the sound of the water, the smell of the gardens, the texture of the materials can be part, or even the contrast between shadow and sun will help to the, not even for the blind people, more for people that is almost blind, people that have double visual. So we work in that, and then in the other hand, how can we play with the same materials, traditional materials like tepetate, that is earth, but you cut that earth and you use it. It's not expensive, you can use it. How can we put it in different heights? So that's, I think, what that is the contemporary. How can, like in another project with volcanic heat, with tepetate, how can you make that elements work different? And 4 or 5 materials, that is very important. Volcanic, concrete, tepetate, water. and how can we work with that to make experience? They didn't ask us for plaza or for patios. So we say we can make all the school with that kind of spaces. We make in the hand with all the concrete scaffold lines that gave you vertical, horizontal. You can touch and say, okay, this is the building we can do. And what I say tepetate, you can make only 1 or 2 floors house. So we make a concrete inside the structure, so you really can make 13 or 14 meters high that you cannot see it in these tepetate traditional buildings, but we can do in other conditions. The constructor is not good, so one more time the strategy was, how can we make tepetate and with the same material of tepetate make like the texture of everything here, no? Or for example, the School of Arts, we make our first project from earth. Yeah, and the thing about that school is we want to make from earth before in one project in San Miguel Allende. So we really see what happened here in Arizona, in Tucson, with the wonderful work of Rick Joy, and we respect a lot. And then how can we do this? We have some people that from here that help us a lot to know how to make it. And then, what is happening in Mexico? They say, okay, you want to make this project? We have 1 month to have the project and 10 months to finish the project. It's amazing. Like, okay, if we don't do it, somebody will do it. So we make it, and in 1 year we make this project to 2,500 square meters, and because there is different buildings, we can make it at the same time. So that's how we make the ramp earth there. We learn to make it at the same time, but we have that kind of liberty in Mexico. We have to understand to make this kind of work with these local materials. And then we really like how to work with this kind of material that, because we love to work with the structure, we can find, in Mexico is a lot of earthquakes, so we can make something to put out the earthquake because the size and the directions of the concrete, and then we can really make in other levels these heavy walls of ramp earth. So how can really you make a reconstruction or idea of I don't know if it's lighting or the gravity of the material going to somewhere? I think you will see in our work.
Well, as Mauricio said, we want to share this with you as chapters and about ideas that we really love and that make us think a lot, and they make us really happy to work with this idea. So we choose some of the projects, and some of the ideas we really love to work with is in typography. And we always use it as a strategy. We love strategies in all senses. And as Mauricio has shown the School of Arts, in a way it was also an opportunity, because the site where we were working used to be completely in one level. And at that point, they were, as he said, we didn't have any money. And what we had was an opportunity that this was a public school, and they were building at that point this reservoir, and they were taking off a lot of earth from the side. So for us was like, take that earth to our site and let's try to translate all of these buildings. We didn't want to have a building at all. We want to construct a garden, a whole garden crater. Once you were inside, you can discover the building itself. So again, this is an opportunity for us to understand that taking off all that earth would cost a lot of money for the school. And what we choose was to take that earth and transform the territory. And in other cases, again, as we love to play with the voidness and with most of the times doing almost nothing but framing and emphasizing what's already there, we got the opportunity to work in this marvelous site, which is very near the States. It's in Ensenada. It's some miles away from Tijuana and San Diego. And we were working with the site. We've been working here for 10 years. So it's been a great opportunity to try to understand the topography, the site, the temperature, everything. All of those elements are very important in our work. And this is a very huge territory, almost 100,000 acres. And what we've been doing is we've been doing small inches on the whole site, and at the first point we tried to understand where to work in, because we needed to design a very small building, which was a winery, only 200 square meters site, which was really small for the size of the site. And what we did is we always tried to understand the north, the south, the sun, the sky, even the stars in this place are really great. And then we understood that there were some olives which were a perfect reticule, which was modeled, and then the grid of the vineyards. And what we did was a very small building, again, understanding the materiality we had, but also playing with a building which was really small, but then how to dialogue with the landscape. We are marveled all the time with the beautiness of the sea, of the mountains in this case, and we wanted to grab all the vineyards and take them into our building. And as our building should be very close, we thought we would work with the gravity and with the section and understanding very simple platforms, the programming of the building itself, and then how to, at the level of the eyes, we could open the building and connect with the landscape. We always want to do landscape instead of doing buildings. We really love this relationship where the building disappears, and then what happens is that the garden gets inside. All these lines of vineyards became part of the space itself, and now it's an exciting place where weddings happen. It is almost not a winery, it's also a showroom. It's a very flexible space. The people doing the wine hate us because he says there's a lot of light going inside the building, but at the end we managed to control it and to make it more part of the mountains and what was going on there. And we do all these small strategies, but this is very pre-Hispanic from our point of view. You know, we have that influence of just going down 1 meter maybe, and even though you think things doesn't happen, everything transforms from our point of view. And then again, understanding the site and the topography of that site, which was really small. I mean, this is almost 3 meters high. We developed some garden of water, which are in the real life program is a bathroom. And we, of course, didn't want to do some bathrooms that look like bathrooms. And we managed to create a garden of water, and then the private space, and then kind of a cinema. And then some structure that disappeared with the landscape again, and dialogue with the topography. And then we did more bigger structures. So it is a very nice place where we could experiment with different scale elements. In this case, some cabanas, where the landscape and the vineyards became the vestibule of the hotel, and now we're building other cabanas which are on the other side. So again, how in a space which was already the landscape, creating something very spectacular there, we could create a camp on one side, and on the other, something that explodes the architectural and experience of living almost the space outside, and create some platforms which now dialogue with the mountain. And here we had two things which we wanted to explore, which was how to get to the ceiling of this room, taking advantage of the mountain itself. So again, the topographical strategy was important. And the second, how to take up 2 walls, which would create a private space up there, so people can spend the night there, because there's no rain at all in Ensenada. So we could create a private, intimate space where people can do whatever they want. Whatever. Yeah, this is the chance. I mean, this time was so great, and we were just saying that they can spend the night there, and we want them to walk, to have a bath, a shower outside, and being like seeing each other from the one cabana to the other. And this guy was like, yes, that's so amazing. So we think that we had a crazy client, and we took advantage of that. And also, he wanted to place, for example, some horses there in the middle of the mountain with a great difference of levels. And we said, how can we do that? And we have the freeway here, and what we did like a big hole, but again, how to do 16 meters high walls without being so expensive. And we understood the natural angle of the earth, and we worked with that, and we just like pour concrete and stone, and with that we built some carved element that took off the freeway from our view, and then considering that the height of the people being in that space would be over a horse, so we created that 3-meter height more or less, and took off and just framed the mountains, which is so beautiful. So every strategy in this project has to do with that. How to disappear the architecture, how to make this housing project, which is 15 houses exactly the same, never know that there are 15 houses, never know that they are houses, always feel that they are almost part of this topography of vineyards. The same we did with the hotel, almost floating without touching the nature. It is very beautiful, very similar desert, vegetation, very small one, so the architecture becomes very protagonic. So how we can make that these mountains be part of the architecture itself. And a lot of people ask us, why you don't do organic architecture? And we say, look at that. It's so organic. I mean, all these curves and all these straight lines, they're all part of the same. And this is a strategy we place in our lab projects, or we like to place with them and play with them. And for example, in this case, this is a house done in Mazunte, which has almost like 35 meters height difference between one spot and the other. And what's important is that even though there's almost 1,000 square meters built in this land, you never know that there's so much square meters built, because we always compose. In this case, we have the trees, and we wanted to be at that height. But if you see with precision, we are almost like 12 meters over the soil, over the fold, and you never feel that. You never need a handrail, even though our clients said, when the guys here are having drinks or have to smoke some pot, well, they're gonna fall. And he said, no, don't worry, the trees will help. We hope. We'll see. And then we wanted to show this because it's great for us. We've been working for a while, as Dan said, in different scale projects, but also in ephemeral work, and we love to do that because all of our projects are like 5 years long projects, and we're exhausted, and we're tired, or we're sued for something. So in this case, it's always happy and helpful to work with projects that are quick, that is easy to see them, and in a few period of time we work in Paris, in Milan, and in Mexico City in these ephemeral type projects, and it's nice because the process is really similar, doing architecture rather than doing these projects. So we started the same way, and we want to talk about process. So we had to work in our favorite building of Guerrero, which is the Fundación Cartier. They invited us to develop a project of the scenography for the Great Animal Orchestra, because we were used to play with things that has to do with sounds and things for people that don't see. So what we thought was at the beginning, well, if we need to work with the orchestra of animals and to show videos, pictures, paintings. We want to relate the first floor to the garden. For us, that ground floor level is such amazing, and we wanted to incorporate the organic stuff, so we thought one material to do everything. At the beginning, we thought a great circle of brick, just to a big typography in small scale to show benches, walls, to show the paintings, the big paintings, to incorporate the art with Adriana Garjao. We worked a piece. So at the end, there were so many bricks that we need in a short period of time that we finally managed to create this, and it is an echo of the garden at the same time, but we wanted to incorporate the people walking through the space, but always seeing the things, not knowing if you were outside or inside, and not knowing if you were in front or outside. But this is pretty much the same as scheme, as we compose our architecture, because it's how these paintings could be seen far away because there were big icons, symbols almost there, and we want the people to see it because they are part of the Great Animal Orchestra too. So this would be like the scenario. We wanted to disappear the glass. We wanted to make it connect to the garden and to be part in a way. Always something also which is important in our work is to break limits. All the time we are exploring a way to open our projects. And in the last project about ephemeral work, we work in the Humix, which is a Chipperfield building in Mexico City. And in this case, it was the last ceiling, which is very complex, very steepy, all these elements. And Ulises Cabrera is very great Mexican artist, sorry. But he wanted to say that art should be for everyone, should be touched. So we decided that we would do a library, and everything would be done in wood, and everything would be like tables for people to be seated and then feel comfortable to open the books and feel free to work with them. But also, again, the thing of framing. And in this case, we thought framing the text, framing the books. But as I said before with the students, that the materials are just tools. Again, of course, we work first with brick, then we work with wood in this case, and at the end, for example, in Hermes, in Italy, we decided to work with the petate. The petate is a material that you've seen in the School of Blind People. We have worked with that. As Mauricio said, this earth cotton in bricks. And we had this project with Hermes. We won the competition. We were fighting against Francis Cadet. So it was an honor to win. It was great to win. And then it was nice because we proposed earth. And the earth was really important because, you know, Hermes, well, when we didn't know Hermes ever, then we discovered that our project was the same price of a clock. And we were like,
sorry, I only have to say that they asked us, that's why they like us, and they want an earth pavilion.
Raw.
No? And in one moment they say, make something with raw earth. But they really need something to make it in 2 weeks, and then to put away in 2 weeks. So that's why remember kind of fit.
But again, this was an opportunity to explore for us. We want to work with earth, but we need to build it and unbuild it in such a short time. And what we did is we wanted to work with 3 saloons and then a patio in the middle, and then again with this idea of building columns, very deep columns. But it was a theater, and there was a parking area down there. So every column we designed was like 64 tons each. Of course, the Italians said, "Why? We can do it with cardboard, very light. We can build it in 2 seconds." And we worked a prototype, of course, to understand that this could be built in cold without using any paste, just placing the bricks and being with this steel element and over this very light element that distribute this. We finally make it in earth, because at the end in Milan, everything was like these firefights. There are pavilion. Once you enter, the atmosphere was important.
We first say, okay, we can put the petate, it's very expensive. We can go in a to the Mexico, to Italy with the petate and still be not economical. But we make investigation and we know that in Italy, in the south, they really work with this same material.
They didn't work with it anymore.
No, like in Mexico, I mean, this is material that they never use it again, but this is the tufo. And the tufo is the same as the petate, and in many different places call it different. But
right.
How come this material nobody uses it anymore? It's not expensive, you can use it. And then we say, okay, the same one you use in Napoli and that's all. And we put it in Milan and it's nice, because then right. We use the local materials with the same properties of this, no? Right. Well, where's the other chapter? Incomes.
In Spanish is incomes.
Okay. This is the first house I made for my mother when I was 25. She was really young in that moment. The idea on what I think is important, we were talking about that time when I was in the school, 24 to 90, more or less. We were in the postmodernism, so it was very difficult how to work with the postmodernism. But in this case, I have a master, Humberto Ricalde, and he said, no, but you can see what happened with Scarpa and other people that understand what can you work with the story. And then for me, I was very close with contemporary artists, so for me, what happened in land art or in arte povera in Italy. So in this case, we said, wow, like in arte povera, you can make, this is a pre-existence, I mean, this is not our land, this is our land. Maybe in some moment was only one building. So what I think is, how can I put this here, stop that is broken, but leave it like that. Like in the povera, you make some object and go to the museum. And then make some something in very contrast to understand the pre-existing part and the new part. And I have to say that here, because it's nice history, it's like a drunk man every time, because this is a very poor area, not anymore, but and then the drunk men sit every time here. When we finish the house, the same drunk man is still sitting in the same place. He's very drunk, but anyway, how can you make architecture that does not stop the story of the downtown, of the place? At the same time, how to make this experience of ephemeral work is working with the persistence. How can we make something in some place? Here, for example, this is a beautiful church that now is a museum from the 16th century, 17th century, and then is in the center of Mexico, so historical. So it's almost going one side because of the water. We have so in one moment, the architect before us, I mean somebody who was in the building, put this floor to put the same level the floor. But the director said, no, I don't want this floor. I prefer to have the stone. So he said, why don't you put again everything out here and then use it for a piece for the place. So that's why we say, okay, with the same material and the workers of the place, we can do something, and we make this a place that can have a space between inside the space. And in other scale, many years later, they invite us to make an intervention in a convent, because we already made the School of Art in Oaxaca. This is Oaxaca. And then a very good client that have a lot of money, and then at the same time he's doing good things for acupuncture for the city with Francisco Toledo, that is a very good artist that make the same. And they say, okay, we can buy this place because inside of some buildings we have a convent and a street inside, but everything was in construction, so we didn't know there is something. So they invite us to say, okay, please make the reconstruction of the convent that we need, because they broke the convent with this street in the 19th century. How can you really make a program inside, cultural program? this is the place. This is a new facade of the place of the 19th century, forgetting the 16th century convent. So was confused because now it's a hotel and we don't know really where is the place. So beginning to work there with a lot of people of restoration, archaeology, many people, we begin to understand that we have to make an empty space here to remember and to have one more time the facade and the street inside, and then because then we have that drawings that show us it happens. This was the place before nobody, parking lot. Nobody knows that was a convent. So we begin to put away the things to understand. Even here, we begin to buy the client begins to buy the different parts of the now cultural center, and then like it is a jazz. They say, okay, we buy this. Okay, so we want one more time. We have to make a strategy to begin to change it, and then we decide, okay, the 21st century has to be steel, glass, very light, because everything is. Materiality is in the history, the existence. So finally, we put this place that is nice because now it's a public space in a private building. So the people really work here, and then now we have one more time the facade of the convent. And then, as we tell you, we have this kind of acupunctures we make with new architecture to make the program. Sometimes restaurant, or have the office and gallery here, and then in the convent. Here, as I said before, we have the public space, that people can really walk here, just to walk, even if you don't want to be to the cultural center, you're making city. And then we put again out all the hotel that have a lot of construction, and then when we finish that, the only way to put the new part, because we have almost nothing there to have the library, is to have a contemporary construction there, here. So that's how we really make this. I mean, in Mexico, to make something like that is really almost impossible in that moment, because it's very strong, this contemporary thing, but at the same time, because we make dialogue with the authorities, we tell them, if we don't make this, they will not put the money for the restoration of the other things. So that's how we found the place, like hotel, and that's how we clean everything and put all the new thing. Even we make this. Remember the roof was in the 17th century, and then in the last part we made even with a more dark wood. We make the new part. I mean, so to understand where was the contemporary part, and then very important how the technology can get the possibility to not have columns, and all this roof that make the shadow to make a portico for our client. Those have columns, and then have the opportunity to be really in the really heavy walls of the convent. Then we can make the library. We can make double space, no? So this is the new part, this is the last part, and how can you make now the program? We can move the ceiling, so even if it's not raining with no sun, it's nice here, or we can do like this. Like I said before, that was a convent. In the 19th century, they put away this. So we need now to really. We found that really was a convent there because they were changing the street, but we asked them if they can really move and put the convent. They say no. We know there is the possibility. We will see in the future, but now impossible. But we know there is the possibility. So this was the convent, and then because we have the shade, because we have this street inside, we say the client, we don't need anymore the facade of the auto. It's 19th century. We really want to have the idea of here is the cut of the 16th and 17th century convent. So understand, we have, as you see here, the possibility to change, to understand we have I don't know if it's in the other.
They will lose.
Yeah, we lose. Okay, here you have the portico, well, the side, and then here before was the rooms. We lost the rooms, so we say, why don't we have the memory of the cut? So that's why we have the doors to get to the rooms, aligned, because this part is new, because the convent was only this element, but we don't want to make something like here, because then it will be very aggressive outside. We want to make very monolithic piece to remember the Santo Domingo convents, no? The Dominicanos, no? The Dominicanos convents.
Yes.
To make, it's a contemporary piece, it's true, but at the same time it's the opportunity to remember what happened in the place. It was very polemic. But really, we play with beautiful stones, with people working these stones, and we make this piece there. And as I say, we make a place public to be with the gallery, restaurant, and the cultural center. Every part we go, we make this kind of acupuncture to take between 19th and 17th century. We change some 20th century that wants to be colonial, but we make something more light to be really, doing something not noisy, but new. And inside only cleaning, and make a gallery. Because it's nice, that 20th century building. And then broke, because that's everything to the street. Now we have the patio inside, so how can we open the space from the gallery and the office to that place? And in the other sides, we leave the only house in the historical center with one level, so we only put in the back the roof, and then make a restaurant with a shadow that can open to the space. And then I like this image because it's about having a strong the history, but having strong the contemporary position to make a program. And we make the same with a house of the beginning of 20th century that they invite us in a competition. So we make everything was a very big wall. So we put out the wall. We make the restoration of this beautiful building, and inside we make some part of the building, and in the back other part of the building. And then inside trying to read a new patio with a garden we make, and then here you can see how the historical part and the new part can be together to make the new program. You know? And then we make very strict to make in the house a museum of the house and the there was how it was before this place, because changed a lot. Was a very nice house, and finally was like a.
It was a house for prostitutes.
Well, in one moment. That's why they.
That's why it was good.
I think we run. We put out the. Well, so we put like this, and then as you see here, what is nice is all this building don't need foundations. I mean, they all is very lighting, and then you can be simple, heavy in the place.
Right. Again, I think the strategy of developing a structure that could float over the old house without doing any interventions in the foundations, touching the house even. It's not being touched. We just place the building over the old walls and make it hang over it and take advantage of that rooftop that we got, which was abandoned and which was beautiful, surrounded by trees.
Yeah, and then we can do these spaces in the top for the director.
For the dean.
For the dean, and you can see the street like this. And this garden in the top too. And then how works the new and the old in different places. How can you really, the persistence can be there, but at the same time you can make new, here is the new building, and then to have a very strong old building. You know? And this is other, because here they want to make a photography museum. They have a fabric of plastics. It's not important, the architecture, but it's working for a museum. So that's why we say, okay, let us know how can we use it. So we analyze all the building, and then we only put a new part here, and then make a reconstruction in the other parts. This is the new part, having like one of them a public space here in a port area. Now the people can have this museum, and then make the reconstruction of the fabric. Is a fabric for some Jewish that came from the Second World War, have something like Bauhaus, and make this building. So we say, okay, we like what happened with the building, just trying to get it strong, you know. And then inside, then we make the new part very lighting, but we design this kind of roofs that are very lighting, without money, and still working with this idea of fabric, you know, control of light, very good height, because this is the central part of the museum. And then you can have open galleries to do whatever you want to, and then you have the other galleries in the other part. No? And we love really to work with the new ideas. How can we make these kind of roofs that you can see the facade of the roof on the top and here. No? And then we can reinforce the other places and make a beautiful galleries here. This is the other place we use now, that I showed you in the beginning, and have you open or have a beautiful light from the north to have whatever photography exhibition you want. This, I have to say, this is not a traditional photography museum. It's more with the new technology to have a big photos, etc. And in the roof we can see that, and then we can have like a place to be for the cocktails, no? So finally, we have this lecture room that we can have here of what happens with the new architecture.
Okay, the other things that we will talk about, which are really important and they are connected, might be not similar, but census, materiality, and politics are things that we want to incorporate in our projects. And I would like to talk a bit about this building, which was a project for the blind again. It was a library, and it was a beautiful project because we needed to work in this old building. The library already existed. It was already for blinds. The first moment we started to work here, we were sued by the blind people, because we closed the library. So it was kind of funny because we understood that our client was very protagonic and wanted to be there. In Mexico, there's not a lot of space where blind people can be, and there are a lot of blind illness. As you saw, the school is because there's poverty, and most of the people who gets blind is not naturally blind. So we visited the library as it was, and it was like this. And then we knew the program they gave us, and it was exactly what they had. And then we understood that we didn't have enough space, enough shelves for all the blind, braille books that will be needed. And then everything that these cabins were not used because they were very small and they were not acoustical. And then for us was the opportunity to design something just to be here. We wanted to take advantage, again, understanding the senses and the things that we have worked before. We said we want to be besides a patio, and we want to design a garden of aromas. We also want to use it as a festival, and also we want to play with the different levels we got, and the voice, the voidness itself, and the sound will make us consider where we are. I mean, in this case, the sound will be the guide for the people to understand the place where they were, and to create some cabins where everything could happen, because we understood that the library for blind people is very noisy. So then we composed the garden with Jerónimo Hagerman, which we have worked before, and we designed these kind of beds for people to do whatever they want. We have seen people doing massages, Tai Chi, playing chess, having dinner, or even food. I mean, a multiple use space. And then again, work with all these elements which we love, which were the colors and the different textures of the wood. In this case, the yellow, which is the best seen color for the blinds, and of course the braille, and the yellow incorporated in the lights, in the handrails, in the rocks for the kids. There was not a program for kids, but what we wanted to use was to create a space which was common for all. You know, a space which would not be just for blind people, but also for people that can see but can hear and create an atmosphere. So we thought we wanted to create some sound scenarios, soundscapes. So we designed a very specific sound atmosphere with different speakers, own speakers, group speakers. So this plan is showing the sounds. And we wanted to work with a labyrinth of sounds, almost doing nothing with a free space, but once you walk through, you discover the space. And that has to do with all the work that we wanted to incorporate, even though in a project building, and then talking about materiality. Here we designed a cultural and sportive center in a very poor area in Cuernavaca, and there were very, very difficult problems, social problems, drug dealing, very complex position, and we had this beautiful site in the middle of a great topography, again, no public space. And in this case, the cultural agent was very important. She showed and understood that there were a lot of orchestras. Again, the sound and the big groups of people playing noise and sound and music. They didn't have a place to play their music or to rehearsal. And what we did is we said we want to create a big void in this big space and put all the workshops up there. The climate in Cuernavaca is, the sun is tough, so we said the buildings will be a shadow at the same time for this voidness, and we can, again, the same strategies, you see, open ourselves to the north, get the light inside, create, I mean, we don't have money, we need to work with intelligence, how to let the wind get inside, let the light get inside, how to create a voidness with shadow, how to create a garden next to it, how to play with the topography, which seems to be the same level, but all the streets were in different levels. So take advantage of that and say, well, the skaters can play with that, and we can create some ramps and create a space for the football players. We can create like a football area. Of course, Mauricio was like, no, this is not the shape of a football court. But I mean, at the end, it was very thankful for all these people because they can finally have a space where they can take advantage of. And we place all these kind of beams, which are buildings, but at the same time the workshops floating over this space. And the thing that we love the most is how to compose, again, playing with the heavy stuff, placing it floating somewhere, but also how to play with the light and the sun and the shadow, and again, the ramps, and make them part of this scenario. This is a cultural space. It is used by the people of the community. We wanted to take advantage again of being inside, outside. The terraces are the vestibule of the studios. The library connects with the garden, but again, just to see the garden, but to have its own space. Again, the play of the light is very important, and of course, all the structural elements. We took advantage of every project to experiment and to explore the structural possibilities we have. So we did it also in this case, and again, putting the tepetate, in this case, chocolate color. The name of the site is Chocolates, the Chocolates, and to put the heavy and the gravity up there, and play with that. And again, talking about memory, about topography, about tectonics and materials, we had the opportunity to work in judicial courts for 5 years. We got exhausted, threatened. It was so hard. But again, working in public buildings, and in this case, what was our biggest advantage, not only the materiality and the opportunity to work in this type of site, which as Pátzcuaro, we got again the stone, we got beautiful clay to work with. In this case, is the opportunity to be political with the work we do. And we think that is really important in our work all the time, especially when we talk about doing walls and dividing and creating difference between one another. In this case, we needed to work in courts, but these was spaces still of hope. The people who is here is still in a process. So we wanted to talk with the buildings and to say, all the public buildings in our city are terrible, all the judicial courts are terrible. And we had the chance, because the justice was changing and everything changed to oral. Orality was an opportunity to think how a building can talk now that everything used to be written. And we decided to create this kind of pavilions, everything very transparent, and a system that would be flexible, and again, working with the limits, and we love this idea of working with shadow and very constrained spaces, but also open again to the garden, and of course, letting the light inside, and playing with the reflection and with the light itself, and never knowing where you are at all. And even though there are buildings done, public buildings, which need to ventilate naturally, they don't have air conditioning, so understand where the light and everything goes there, and how to create a landscape with the program itself. These are the areas for the supposedly guilty people, but they became a landscape at the end. They have their own garden, and there's an opportunity of how deconstruct the space and play with the politics stuff, because we really think that we need to say something, and this was the opportunity to say to the community, the justice in our country is changing, and it starts being shown by the work we're doing, shown that the difference between the area of the guilty guys and the judges is just light. There are not bars in between, just light.
Yeah. What is really important in the last two projects is how can we begin, but all the time we do, but in these two projects you can see how it's important that architecture is political, and ethical. How can we make advantage of the program and to change for this kind of program, adventurous, but at the same time, when we talk with the people and they say, yes, we need a place to be cultural, to have our own place to dancing, to play soccer, to spread. Then now the people was very happy with us. Even one time I was there and I have in a little tiendita, the store, to have a water, and I said, hey, how much it is? Nothing. Why? Because you're making this for us. And when you have this kind of givings, you say, this is the thing we have to do. And then, as we see in the other projects, the last two, the light, the texture, the materiality, is something we can have advantage of that, to have this kind of atmosphere, that experience that you need between going inside, walking. The architecture is not an object, it's experience. It's a place to be, and you have different lights. And when the people say, how come the architects repeat the architecture and make a style? If you begin to work about the space, about what's in the intentional, then I cannot understand that you can repeat yourself. You need time to observe the observation. You need time to really know what to do in every project. That's true. You cannot repeat yourself. You need to really make a new experience. Depends the light, depends the culture, depends the people, depends the client and the cultural society. So, in this chapter, it's about that. This is a intervention about the emptiness. How can we make a hall to change a place? They invite us to do something in a gallery that was a house and later a gallery, and we only make a hall. Yes, to cross the house to have the opportunity to see different levels of light, different experience of the activities. They never change. You can be in the bathroom, you can use the closet, but you change the space with almost nothing. Just astute in the head.
You let the wind in.
Yeah. And then with that, we talk about some pavilion, sound pavilion we make in San Luis Potosí. This pavilion is, we work with my brother that is musician, and he will make texture of the sound of the birds. And we need to make, they say, we need 5 artists to do something in this museum. It was a museum from Legorreta. And they say, because you are architects, you put something here now inside of the museum. And they say, here you can make your pavilion. But we go there and we say, but here we have because this was a military zone, and then here was a practice of shooting here to this wall. But when we go to the place, we found this wall, this tree, and 2 rocks. And then we understand that the real persistence we want to see is the tree, the 2 rocks, and this wall. And we say, wow, this is maybe it's not like the convent, maybe it's not like, but it's a strong persistence. So how can we deal with that? Even when they say we make a pavilion, in one idea we say, oh, we can do something really more, it's a moment to make something more formal, but we remember that the important thing in architecture is the risk to
being unseen.
And we think in our architecture, we want to work with that. To not see us in the landscape, but when you are inside, you can have the experience. And then if it's strong, we make the good things. Like in this case, we decided to make one wall, the other wall, and then make a little holes here between the rocks.
Which are unseen.
But you can, depends you're a child or big or whatever, you can see outside and you have a shadow, a place to be. And then maybe some people that go to the place say, where was your pavilion? I only see some ruins in the back. So this kind of stone reminds these beautiful walls that the campesinos, the farmers make to divide
their land.
We call it tecorrales. But when you begin to see that you have this concrete, this hole, then you begin to see that, okay, this may be other thing. This is the old one, this is the new one, this is a hole, so this is what happened there. And then you go, you see a shadow, and then you inside, and then you remember one more time the tree, 2 rocks, and that wall. And now we have this other wall with the bocinas, the speakers, and the shadow. And then there are little holes that remembers the shops, no?
Yeah.
The shops, but at the same time it's the opportunity to see into the other side. But it's a place to have a reflection, it's a place to be, to have many programs of the museum. I mean, the kids can go there, the people can go just to think there, and then I really like this project because it's the opportunity to say, wow, with a floor, a roof, and a wall, we can make space. And everything there can happen, depends who will live in there, what programs they want to make from the museum. And at the same time, we talked before on Cuatro Cuatros, they say, well, we have a lot of parties and weddings, we need some bathrooms. So please make some bathrooms. But we say, okay, one more time. We need to make, with the time, because we have 10 years working there, we have with the time making buildings to make all this place. So why don't we make some bathroom, but at the same time, a patio and the experience. So if you go there and you have this patio and you go to the bathroom, and then when you wash your hands, then you can have a water platforms. You know, Ensenada is almost not raining, only 2 weeks a year, and then happens that with the water you have other ambient, you know. So, and this is a persistence. We have a persistence. We have olive trees here. So one more time, what is your persistence? In this case, is olive trees and the topography. So then you have to observe, you have to think, you have to go to the place to understand how to do. And then one more time, how can we play with the natural landscape, doing a water garden. and there is the olives, no? Over there. And then, one more time, the experience. You can walk, go inside, walk over there, and then how can, in all the experience, to go to the bathroom, you can see it. Then, one more time, the experience to play with materials. Now the light is important to think about the structure, the lighters, everything in our work is really now wood, in other moment stone or ground earth. How can we make this reconstruction of the building, but at the same time, this gave you an experience and very important emptiness, the voidness of that gave you atmosphere. And when happened that, I have to say something like alchemia, that when you begin to think in that, you are not thinking anymore in form, you are thinking in...
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. So that's why finally, why we can have this experience in the patio, we can go to the place and then feel the sound of the water, and then if you go to up, then you have a garden. Anymore a bathroom. I mean, you have a garden for people. The five facade is really a garden for the people is in the top. And that's why I think even if you have a small program, even if you don't have money, because
they were really expensive.
Nah.
Come
on. No, the truth is that not only a bathroom, you make a place. And that is important for all the complex. So if you see in the complex, it's almost nothing, but change you a lot everything. And then one more time, if you compose with these walls and make space, then you can make experience. And in the same level, and I think that's why in this chapter we're talking about not very big buildings. How can you make strong experience in the buildings? In this case, it's the studio of photography of my mother. It's only the place she had for make the editions, and then have all the photographies, objects of all the life, etc. It's 100 square meter land, so it was very difficult to understand how can we do that. So we decided to make two patios.
But she said, I want the tower of brick.
Yeah, I want a tower of brick, but I don't want to see outside.
I don't want to see outside.
Tower, brick, don't see outside, okay. So we make two patios, 3 levels. Here is kitchen, bathroom, and then we have 9 meters high, some library to have everything, objects, archive, and books and photographies. And then the opportunity to have north-south this experience. So outside is how this works with the community of it's very close to the other house, and we showed you before, from my mother. And then we make something without concrete when it's celosia. I don't know if celosia is that you have this...
It's like a screen.
Yeah, the screen to the wind and the sound can go inside. And then how can really, with only steel every 60 centimeters, you can make something for the earthquake. You can find here how it works in horizontal, this steel. It's almost like an Hermes we wear too. I mean, how can...
The Hermes process, the structural investigation we developed, helped us to develop this one, because it was pretty much the same, working just with steel, and how the form and the shape of the perimeter of the volume we were working with could work without, so we could take off the concrete. We don't have any columns here, so everything's structural. Again, the ephemeral work helped us to understand how to apply that to these buildings.
Yeah, so here is the section, how it works, and then how you can manipulate the light to have different experience. In the case of where you have this, obviously you need only penumbra, like say Barragán, almost no light to have better all these kind of objects. And how can you respond to the neighbors? So when here you never have holes, and here you have holes, no? And every time when you have the first floor, obviously you don't have holes because you need the privacy. And then we can work with that. I mean, we can really make with the same material, artisanal. These workers never make this kind of brick before, but we make a wall. They say, okay, for 1 month, okay, like this, I like. They understand, and they make it in 3 or 4 months, all the walls. So what's incredible how they learn really fast, and the nice idea is how we use this structural thing to not have concrete here. And then we have this experience every floor. Because then if you have only 6 by 5 room, but you can have 2 patios, you have 15 long distance space. And then happen this one more time, we have not more than 5 materials, we have the brick, the wood, the concrete, and how every part, because with my mother say, first, we can have white, these walls, but later I tell her, can we work with all the building in brick, and if you don't like it, we can make white, like this, and she said, okay, let's do it. And now she liked it, and because then you are in the same skin. Here's where she works, in the top, and then we put in the last the opportunity to see the city and to have a shadow to be there. Here, more or less, you can see what happened with the steel and the bricks, and then how can you have this 9 for 5 by 5 patio, and then you can have a garden, the accident, one more time, and then understand, and I want to say one more time of these 3 buildings, small buildings, how can the life of the nature, the life that you can be there is important, and how can the sun can be between the voidness of the brick. At the same time, they gave you surprises. They gave us what's it, regalo. It's a gift for us when it happens this, because then you can understand that the important thing in architecture is played with light, the texture, the temperature, and then if having that, the important thing is there. The dignity of the space. If it's little scale, big scale, money, no money, really the answer is to have time to observe, time to think, and time to be political and ethical.
I mean, just to finish, we would like to finish with this some images of the land where we work. As we have said before, we need to observe our territory. We need to understand where are we working, what's the vegetation, the light, the earth. And we work in a territory that moves. It moves a lot. It has caused a lot of damage. The last year, a lot of constructions and old buildings fell down. A lot of the history and the memory of the place has been stolen in a way, maybe because of modernity, maybe because of this want to be modern, you know, people feeling they are not secure living in houses made of earth, but also the concrete fell down. People living in different type of communities and try to understand how they live, what are the materials there. And for us, it was a year of trying to understand a bit more about the way of living of all these land around us. As I've shown, there are people living in the beaches, in this case in the woods, so they use a lot of wood, in this case in historical sites with housing 300 years old, which fell down, not because it is bad to live in earth, but because they didn't give any maintenance to all of these elements, and people were throwing their houses away. They invested a lot of money and time to turn down buildings because they were scared, because there's not information and there's ignorance around. And it was an opportunity to see how the participation of architects working here might be important, and what would happen with all the developers. It's a business all around, and what the architects with brilliant ideas bring to improve housing. And we are scared of that because we think that we have forgotten to observe and to understand the territory and to understand the culture and to think of the opportunities we still have. And we invest a lot of time, maybe not designing gorgeous buildings, but working with the communities, working in the school, maybe developing this kind of workshops, how to do bricks of earth with the students, trying new samples of make these things to communicate to the community that this is a security, that it is not dangerous to live on earth elements, that they should take care of their history and their memory, that we could create small and subtle elements made of wood that they can fabricate, because the auto construction is something that we have in our country. 95% of the work that's being done, it's done not by architects, thank God, but it is done how they can reinforce the structures, have the opportunity to see things they have forgotten, create a structural section that might help them, and at the same time, which is a participation of our work. And if we need to do something, I think the important stuff to share with you here is that we should stop a bit to understand that the pileta of agua is still needed, that the fogón to warm a place, or the fire to warm a place, is still part of the culture, that all the people doesn't live the same way we live, and that maybe taking opportunity of the ceiling that they already had, or just getting the light inside. And those are the elements that we think we want to work with, and we want to make part of our work.
Yeah. This is the photography of the model. We put it because it's in Chalma. It's an inspiration because it's about construction. It's about the people doing the buildings. As Gabriela said, we think it's good that the 95% of people make their own houses, because they can have more offer to really have 1, 2, 3 floors, and not this is to think about 60 centimeters that with a lot of money. What we have to do as an architect is acupuncture. I mean, something that helps the city to change cultural centers, even houses. But this idea of working with the city, with the community to do things. But the organic thing about the cities still be part of the who make it. In all the life, in all the history, it happens in every part of the world. So understand that, one more time, the observation, the opportunity to say how the people work, how come they really make beautiful spaces, patios, streets, and they make it very the Jewish of the culture of these people working there, to understand that and to help with this kind of acupunctures, contemporary, with more smart thing that money, that's the idea, and then we can help to make better cities. Just understand that the people will make a strong cultural cities. They have strong community, cultural, and then we have to understand, we only have to be really smart in the chest to make the pieces to really help to make dignity with these acupunctures. Thank you very much.